Well, aloha. Coming to you from Hawaii today. Well, not really, but I thought I'd kind of get set the scene here because there's something that happened in Hawaii that's been happening that relates to our next topic, and it's called ecological succession. Now, I did go to Hawaii once. Went there for Mr. Howe, Mrs. Howe's wedding. It's been about 10 years ago now, um, but we actually took a trip around the island. And as you can see here in this picture, if I can, we were over here in Kona, and we drove down to the south part of the island. Now, the south part of the island is where the volcano is still active. So, quite a different scene here where you got mostly volcanic rock. Now, we drove on around, ended up getting to the north side of the island, and just completely different. Um, and I'll show you what I mean. If we look at here, here is the south side, and this is maybe not what you picture in Hawaii when you think of paradise, but this is the south end, as I was talking about, and you see mostly rocks. Now, as we made our way up towards the north side of the mountain, things began to change. Not mountain, I said island. But anyway, things began to change, and you started to see some grasses that have filled in. And if you think about that, how do you go from complete rock to plants? And that is the topic we're going to be talking about in that succession. As we got on up to the north coast, this is what we saw. And you see, we were just in a huge forest. We took ATV rides through the forest, and you can look out the north side and I believe see some of the other islands. I think Maui's barely visible. Um, I don't think you can see it in the picture very well, but quite a difference in how you go from complete rock to complete forest. But that is something that we call ecological succession. And this term, gradual change from one community, and we've talked about communities being living things from one community to another. I think of in history, you had different rulers at different times. You had different kings that maybe came into power, and they would rule for a while, and then they would maybe be taken over by another ruler that was maybe more powerful, more stronger. And so that's kind of why they call it this succession, that over time you'll see different stages. Now, this diagram is showing you all the stages of succession. Now, as I was showing you um, in Hawaii, just imagine for a period of time, an area would be all rock. So you'd be in this stage. Then as time goes on, you would maybe see the rocks start to break up. Maybe you start to see some things show up on the rock. And eventually, as time goes on, you'll see these varying stages of succession. So this picture is a little misleading. You don't see all this at once, but you see this gradual change over time in one area. Now, as we went from the south end of the island, that was rock, to the north end, that was forest, this is kind of the gradual changes we drove. But in one location, it would take many, many years for that change to happen. But that is succession. And they divide this up as primary succession and secondary. And what we call primary succession, that would be a place where there's no soil. This would be like Hawaii, volcanic rock. Maybe after an earthquake, you could also get this situation, but a lot of times volcanoes are the cause of this. Um, but again, it's just that gradual change from complete rock to a forest. And this does happen, obviously. Hawaii has changed in that manner. And so it makes you think a little bit about that. How did things get there? Well, maybe seeds floated across the ocean. Maybe birds flew by and dropped seeds on the islands. And, little by little, things start to inhabit the island, or possibly even people took different plants to the island. And so those are all ways it can get there, but this does happen even on its own, naturally on its own, without people involved. So here's another diagram showing succession, and you got this arrow showing that over time, this is what can happen. And if you go to different places, even look outside, you may see a stage you haven't cut your grass in a while that maybe you start to grow up and see some things like this, and maybe fence rows where they don't cut the grass, cut fields at all. You'll start to see shrubs show up, and eventually trees, and that's called succession. All right, got a keypad question for you. You can just take a look at that for a second. Think of which of the following would show up first and survive on rocks? Algae, moss, and lichen, grasses and shrubs, or trees and shrubs? Give that a second for you to think about it, and we'll show the results. Simulated results, of course. All right. Algae, moss, and lichen. They call these type of organisms the pioneer community. And they're the first things that move into an area. And I put a picture there of the pioneers, how they came in, built these log cabins because they cut down trees. You know, the first people to move into an area, sometimes we call those a pioneer. And that is exactly what they call these plants. Well, not exactly plants, but other type of organisms that move in and begin to grow on rocks. You know, here's some pictures of lichen, and you may notice this, they're kind of green, flaky things. They're actually a symbiotic relationship between algae and fungus. Yeah, algae and fungi are living really close together, and they make this substance they call lichen. So kind of interesting how that happens, but you can see this on the sides of trees, on the sides of rocks, and it's kind of a green, flaky gray. Encourage you to get outside and see if you can find some lichen. But they're the first things to move in. As they live and they die, they begin to actually make soil. And over time, mosses could fill in that area. So that's the early stages here of succession. The pioneer, what they're calling the pioneer stages in the diagram. Pioneer community seems to move in, and as you get more soil, you start to get bigger plants. And that's, you know, you see here in this diagram, you start to get thicker soil and trees that need roots. I mean, that's really what's necessary to get trees. You got to have enough soil. So as plants come in, they live, they die, they produce more soil. That leads to more and more diversity and bigger plants, really. So pioneer community. Now within succession, when you get towards the end, you get the climax community. So when you get to the final stage of succession, you get the plants that are going to be there at the end. You know, maybe think of language arts when the climax of a book, the most exciting part of a book. Yeah, I guess you could say that for a community. That's the ultimate goal of what you wanted to get to, is this final stage. Okay, think about this. Which of the following would make up the climax community? You think it'd be the algae, grasses, or trees? All right, and that would be trees. So again, you look towards the end here. See this diagram? That would be the climax community. So those are the stages of succession, going all the way from rock to the climax community of a forest. And this takes a long time. This could take hundreds of years for this to happen. But it's pretty interesting, again, to go to Hawaii and see that. I think I would kind of like to go back. So maybe I'll do that Maybe I won't. Till next time. See you then.